Morning. There's always a little gem that's dropped through the post, isn't there? I love this. The Information Commissioner's Office, they've written to my business, right? Dear Sir, Madam, there's no one here with this address called Sir, Madam. You've now got to pay a fee for data protection to them, the Information Commissioner's Office. I wish that bloody dog would shut up. Jeez. Right, you've now got to pay a fee to the Information Commissioner's Office if you run a business for data protection. Most companies need to pay £40 or £60 a year. If you need to pay and do not, by law, you could be fined up to £4,000. Our records show that you have not paid this fee to date. Not really likely to either. Yeah, well, you don't protect my data, do you? Because my stuff gets hacked all the time. So, never mind. Oh, and of course I'm not allowed to attend court anyway, or offer any evidence in a courtroom. Thanks, Judge Enright. And I'm not allowed to make a complaint against the police either, of course. Or contact my local council for that matter. So, well, you can fine me £4,000 if you want, because I won't be paying that either, and all you can do is knock on the door. So, sorry. So terribly sorry. Right. Guys, I can only assume that some people don't have the intelligence to understand what would happen during an actual pandemic, if there really was a pandemic. I don't think some people quite get this, right? Let's just start with water supply, electric, gas. The pumping stations need to be manned by people to work out problems. The electric stations need to be manned. The gas flow needs to be regulated and monitored. And I imagine consistently you probably get fractures in the pipeline and stuff like that, and that has to be fixed probably on a daily or a weekly basis, right, depending where you are in the world. I mean, gas lines stretch from Russia, right across here. So that in an actual pandemic, and people were dropping dead in the street, so to speak, which is what Boris is trying to make out, that the human race is doomed. In 3 days that would be gone. All your gas supply, electric, water, you wouldn't have it. Right, the day after that, there'd be no food in the shops, because by that time panic would have set in and anything left over would have been looted. Because most of the police would probably have died as well, you see, and the army. If you're talking about a massive eradication of people, right, it's not just the people. It's the police, the army, the hospitals would be shut down because there wouldn't be enough nurses and doctors. Right. You wouldn't be able to get fuel, petrol, diesel, whatever it is, from the petrol stations because it's all electronic. It has to be operated from inside the shop. And for a start, the electricity's gone down. So even if you do get into the shop, you still can't use the pumps. So everything would just halt, guys. In the space of a week, the entire world, as we know it, the entire working world, would just stop because there'd be no point going to work anymore because we all get paid electronically through the bank and all the banks would be shut down. So even if you get into the bank, you would be able to work the system to put money into your account from someone else's account. Even if that money was there, because if they hadn't been paid by someone else, you couldn't get the money to pay yourself, even if you were able to operate the system, right? Virgin Media, Sky, all these internet people, right? They've got teams 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They've got teams in these offices monitoring and working out glitches in the system. And they probably have shutdowns and stuff like this happening all the time. And all those people are there to stop that happening. When the TV goes off or something, or your phone signal goes, you always get messages through and stuff, don't you? Well, we've got a fault in the system, we're working as hard as we can to fix it, blah, blah, blah. That just wouldn't happen, right? So your internet's gone. So your gas is gone, your electric's gone, your water's gone, your internet's gone, there's nothing. The only thing you might have is landline phone numbers, but again, British Telecom, there's teams of people working round the clock to sort out glitches. You see people in the British Telecom vans and stuff going into these little sheds that are on the sides of roads and stuff. That's them doing maintenance, that's them sorting stuff out. That's when problems occur and they get sent out to fix it by the people in the offices who wouldn't be there because most of them would be dead. So, yes, it is 10 o'clock in the morning, by the way, I don't care. Just be glad I'm not swearing. Okay, so, in a real pandemic, in an actual pandemic, believe me, you won't be worried about wearing face masks. Not walking down the street seeing people lying dead in the street, you wouldn't. You won't be worried about vaccinations, because again, you'd be walking down the street, there'd be loads of people lying dead in the street. They've probably had the vaccination. No point in me getting one because they've already died. Apart from which, as per the hospitals, there'd be no receptionist staff or very little. There'd be no doctors or nurses in the general practice surgeries on the high street because most of them would be dead. Believe me, if this actually happened, you can argue all you want about the government arguments about you've got to wear a face mask for this, you've got to do social distancing for that. In an actual pandemic which threatened the human race, you wouldn't have time to even listen. The TV would be off anyway, right? There would be no media because all the satellites would be spinning out of control because all the little people in NASA, whoever it is, control them, half of them would be dead. And there wouldn't be enough people to sort out all the problems. So there'd be no media. Boris wouldn't get to make his announcement because everything would be shut down and you wouldn't have time. You wouldn't have time to follow any safety precautions. You would be more worried about getting clean drinking water, getting heat, especially if it was the winter time and it was cold, some sort of gas or electric to cook food, because human beings do rely largely on cooked food. We're not animals. We can't kill and eat raw food. It generally has to be cooked. And believe me, you'd end up living out in the boonies, in the forests. You couldn't stay in town centres because of all the dead and dying people. There'd be too much infection. And the next thing you know, the animals in the woods and the forests would get a scent for all the dead and dying people because they like corpses. Some animals even like decaying corpses. And all of a sudden we'd find out exactly how many wildcats and stuff like that lived out there because they'd all be coming into the town centres, they'd all be trying to get into the houses, they'd all be trying to eat all the corpses. So, all you morons queuing for fuel, and the some I saw in the garage this morning when I came into town, garages I've heard about queues, people queuing up for 6 hours constantly until the petrol and diesel actually runs out. I wouldn't worry, because if this was real, if this was really going to affect 75% of the human race, you'd either be dead or you'd be trying to survive.